Alright, so no introduction, let's get straight into it. So the first thing you want to be changing on the controller schemes is the soldier buttons, and you want to switch that over to alternate, and that'll just mean that the crouch, prone and slide button will now become the R3 button, and this is really important in this game to ensure that you have the crouch, prone and sliding function as R3, as it means you won't need to take your thumb off the analog stick, so you can still aim while you're performing those functions. And in this game you'll tend to use those a lot more than needing to melee people, so that's why I do recommend that you do play on the alternate controls. Next up, let's look at the soldier aim sensitivity. Now with the aim sensitivity, there isn't a one size fits all or best sensitivity all round. You have to be playing around with this to find the right sensitivity for you. Now what I recommend you do with the sensitivity is, if you are overshooting targets, so flicking past them when you're shooting, you want to reduce this down. If you feel as though it's too slow and you're not quite getting your aim on target and it's kind of lagging behind, you want to obviously move it up. 31 for me is a really good sensitivity in this game. It just means that, as most engagements in this game are long range, it gives you enough control over long range engagements for things like recoil, but also gives me enough sensitivity to be able to react to situations either behind or to the side to me. But with your sensitivity, I think that if you choose anywhere between 30 and 50, I don't think you can go far wrong. But again, just test which one feels best for you, and if you're overshooting targets, reduce it. If you're undershooting, then of course increase it. Alright, so next up is your field of view. Now the thing to remember in this is that, unlike Call of Duty Warzone, that figure that you get in Warzone is the horizontal field of view. The figure in Battlefield 2042 that we see here is actually your vertical field of view. I will leave a link down in the description that can convert this over, so if you are coming from Warzone to Battlefield, you can convert your horizontal over to vertical and vice versa. But what I do recommend with your field of view is, if you're playing on controller, make sure you keep this on a lower side, as if you put it too high, your targets can appear really small in the distance, and compared to someone who's using a mouse to aim, your controller isn't going to be as accurate, and it just gives you a smaller target to hit in the distance. So I do recommend that you keep this on the lower side. I found that 77 works really well in terms of being able to have good peripheral vision, but also doesn't make the targets appear too small in the distance. The main thing with your field of view is, once you've found the right one for you, stick with it, as it can change your perceived sensitivity. Onto ADS field of view then. Now I currently have this on, and that just means that when you aim down sight, the level of zoom that you'll get from aiming down sight will be relative to your main field of view. If you turn this off, this will actually zoom further in, more to the value of the default FOV, which I think is something around 60, I believe. So this is something that you've got to try out either way, but I love having it on, as when you're aiming down the sight with a red dot sight, for example, you can see a lot more of what's going on around you, rather than being too zoomed in that you can only see maybe who you're shooting at and not who's coming in from the left or right. So I do recommend that you do try and play with this on, but if you're used to having it off, then leave it off. But on is definitely the best way, I think, just so you can see more of what's going on when you are aiming down sight. Moving on to aim assist. Now I've turned the soldier aim assist zoom snap completely off, as I've noticed that when there's multiple targets all in one space, it tries to pull you from left to right, and it can actually hinder more than help. So I like to turn that all the way off, and I've left the soldier aim assist pretty much on at full strength, and that just essentially slows the crosshair down as you move over a target. So it just helps with your accuracy, and it means that you won't be jumping left to right or overshooting your target as much as you would usually do without any aim assist. Again, play around with this, but that's my preference and that's my recommendation for your aim assist settings in this game. Alright, so all these here are all pretty much standard, and you can change these if you want to. I'm not going to discuss those today, as they're all self-explanatory. What I do want to come on to though is the soldier zoom aim sensitivity. What that essentially means is as default, it's usually kept at 100. So that just means that when you aim down sight, your aim down sight sensitivity will be 100% of what your main sensitivity is. So in my case, it's 31. Now, if you do overshoot targets slightly, and you do feel as though when you are aiming down sight you're missing, you can reduce this slightly. I'm currently playing on 91%, but that is personal preference. What I don't recommend you do is go all the way down to sort of like 50, otherwise that will completely mess with your muscle memory you are trying to build between your main sensitivity and your aim down sight sensitivity. So if you're going to change this, I only recommend you do it by a small margin, from 100% to let's say 90 or 85. But again, that is personal preference, but that's essentially what the soldier aim sensitivity is, or the soldier zoom aim sensitivity is. Okay, moving on to the advanced settings then. Starting with aiming left-right acceleration, this is something you absolutely want as minimal, if at all, and that's just because it'll make your life really difficult when you're trying to predict where your crosshair is going to go when you push your analog stick to the left or the right. And that's because how this acceleration works is if you push your analog stick 50% to the right, the aiming will start off kind of slow, that movement will, but it will then start to speed up until it reaches 100% of the input. So as you can see from that, it will make it really inconsistent and difficult to learn, which is what you don't want. So if you're going to have any acceleration at all, keep it minimal like I have here at 3, maybe even 5, but maybe even just turn it off, because it won't really help you if you get into the sort of 50% and the 100%. So yeah, I definitely recommend keeping this off or keeping it very minimal. If you do play Warzone, this does have aiming acceleration in, but it does have better aim response curves you can choose that can help mitigate the acceleration and actually make it work for you. But in this game, it doesn't have those options, so I definitely recommend that you keep this either completely low or off. Moving on to vertical aim ratio, you want to keep this as standard. If you change it up to 100% or even put it at 0%, it makes your aim feel really off and weird and changes some strange things with your vertical inputs. So I do recommend that you keep this just as standard, or if you are going to change it, once you've got to a point where you're happy with your controls and you want to fine tune a couple of bits here and there, maybe do this a couple of points above or below and see how it feels, but I certainly wouldn't recommend going any more than that. I've currently got mine and I play off 50, which I feel really comfortable with. Okay, and the final two then are the uniform soldier aiming and coefficient. First of all, you 100% want uniform soldier aiming on, as what we're trying to do here is build muscle memory and make everything feel as consistent as possible. And if you don't have much consistency between your hip fire aim and your aiming down sight aim, then you're never going to be able to learn what inputs are required to aim at certain targets and how fast you need to react to things. So you want to make sure you keep this on, as it will keep your aim down sight speed and your hip fire speed really consistent. And with your coefficient, unless you know what you're doing with this, because it requires a hell of a lot of calculations to make sure you got the right coefficient, I would just completely leave this at standard at 133. There are articles online that you can find that help you work out a good coefficient for you, but like I said, unless you know what you're doing, keep it at 133 as standard. And then all your aim zoom sensitivities keep at 100. You don't want to be moving or changing these round, as again it can cause inconsistency with your aim and your brain won't be able to figure out one sensitivity from the other, so it will just end up causing you inaccuracy. Moving on to vehicles, you'll find a similar story here as I have with my on foot controls, and it follows a consistent approach. With my vehicle aim sensitivity, I like this slightly numbed down, as I don't like to overshoot with vehicles. I just find it easier on a lower sensitivity than my on foot controls, so I put that at 20. A lot of these though you can change yourself. I've got a lot of them at 100. Aircraft controls I've got inverted. For some reason I just always played inverted controls for aircraft, so don't call me weird, but you know, that's just what I prefer. This is stuff you can figure out again yourself. And with the advanced controls, again, they're pretty much the same as what I've got for my on foot controls when it comes to things like uniform, vehicle aiming, left right acceleration and vertical aim ratio. I'm not a huge vehicle player myself on this game, so I've not fine-tuned these as much as I have done with the on-foot controls, but as a ballpark to get you started, have a look at some of these and just start making adjustments to what you feel you need or works best. And then finally onto controller tuning. I recommend that you keep your dead zones as low as possible without getting any stick drift, and the way to test that is start at 0 with both your left and right stick, and if you're getting any movements without you touching the analog sticks, you keep nudging it up until you find a spot where there are no movements with your controller without you touching it, and that will be the same for the left and the right stick here, and mine essentially are at number 3, as that dead zone gives me enough where I do not get any stick drift without me touching the analog sticks. Okay, next is your Axial dead zone. I just recommend keeping this at 15, as I think 15 works really well, but if you are tempted to play around with this, it's almost like having a rubber band attached to your analog stick, where if you go all the way to the left or the right, you'll almost feel like a rubber band's pulling your aim back in slightly, and that's the case if you nudge it all the way up to 30, you'll get more of that effect. 15 is somewhere in the middle, but if you do put it all the way to 0, you'll notice that you have no kind of like rubber band protecting you from aiming left or right all the way and not being able to stop. So I think that the Axial dead zone of 15, which is the standard, works really well, but this is something you can actually test out. So if you do feel as though you're overshooting targets too frequently, then yeah, by all means nudge this up slightly and see if that helps you. So that's essentially your Axial dead zone. It works really well actually. It's a good feature. So yeah, just play around with that, but I actually think that 15 is the best of both worlds. It doesn't give you too little, doesn't give you too much, and I think 15 just, yeah, generally works really well. Max input threshold, you just want to keep that at 100, and that just means that if you say put it down to 70, it means you only need to push your thumbstick 70% of the way for it to reach the maximum threshold. From an accuracy point of view, you kind of want to keep that at 100, to be honest. So yeah, I don't recommend really changing that from the standard. And then your controller triggers, again, up to you. That's dead zones for those and input threshold, so that's personal preference. Alright, so the final secret setting is that once you have found some settings that kind of work, stick with them for a period of time, because otherwise if you're constantly changing your settings, you will never build up the muscle memory required for you to become as accurate and as good as possible. So that is the final thing that I would say when it comes to settings. If you enjoy this video or found it helpful, please drop me a like, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more content like this, and I've got a lot more coming on the channel when it comes to Battlefield 2042 in the future, and I shall hopefully see you in the next one. Peace.